Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode. I am Iris Sariani, and in this episode we are continuing our conversation about having boundaries. And if you hadn't tuned in to last week's episode, I was talking about how guilt can sabotage our boundaries. And I'll leave a link below this episode to last week's episode in case you missed it. But this week, what we're talking about is boundaries and our fear of losing what we have. Boundaries are one of those things that without having them in a healthy, balanced way creates a lot of disharmony in our lives. And maybe you're struggling to have boundaries, and particularly in your relationships. And if you are, know that you're not alone, because boundaries are one of those things that many people struggle with. And yet they are crucial to our well-being. They're crucial to our mental health. They are crucial to the relationship you have with yourself. They're crucial to the healthy relationships that we have with others. And they're crucial to our happiness. Boundaries are so very important, yet it's a skill that we're not taught. And even though we know that they're good for us, they also create a tremendous amount of fear when we have to speak up for ourselves, lay down the law, whatever it happens to be. So if boundaries are so good for us, why are they so difficult to have? And that's a really good point. Because I think on some level, we do realize that they are very good for us, but it's difficult. It's so difficult for so many. So why is that? There are a couple reasons why they're so difficult to cultivate. And I do say cultivate. It's not something that you have, because it's never been taught to us. So we have to learn the skills and then cultivate being comfortable having them. So the obvious reason being that we've been conditioned to put the needs of others before our own and to not be selfish. The thing about this is that belief system that has been handed down to us, when you think about how many times you have heard someone say to you, don't be so selfish, or that's selfish. And this belief comes from an old, outdated paradigm that is no longer relevant in this new age of Aquarius. We're officially in the new age of Aquarius. And this is a whole new era for us, where self-love, taking care of ourselves, and making ourselves a priority is needed, so that we are able to not only raise the vibration of the planet, but also to fully be able to be in a position to help other people without sacrificing and exhausting ourselves. So prior to this, it was all about, what can I do? Who can I be? What do I need to do so that other people felt good? And we all know that when we approach life and relationships that way, we sacrifice our own mental, physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual well-being. But the whole world and how we relate to one another is shifting. And with that, we also have to make the shift back into self-love. And you'll notice that more and more people are starting to have really strong boundaries. And perhaps even you have already had that awareness that you need to be working on having better boundaries. And perhaps you're even sometimes feeling really good about the concept, and you say to yourself, I can do this. Yes, I can do this. But then as soon as you do, you backpedal because it's extremely uncomfortable. And as I mentioned, having boundaries has more to do with cultivating a new skill and being comfortable with it. So at this point, it has a lot to do with the discomfort of having them and how somebody else is going to feel about you having a boundary or being able to say no or to say what you need to say. Now, on the flip side of this is people are uncomfortable with boundaries because they also fear what they may lose. So not only are we conditioned now to put the needs of others before our own, we are also creatures of possession, meaning it's not easy for us to let go of what no longer belongs in our lives. We have such a fear of losing what we so desperately love and want to have that we actually give our power away to someone or something else, hoping that when we do this, that we will get love in return and that person or that relationship, whatever it happens to be, will remain in our lives. We don't want to lose those types of things. But what happens instead is we end up cultivating codependency, codependent relationships. We put up with narcissistic and unhealthy relationships. We feel taken advantage of. We feel undervalued and underappreciated. And I'm sure that many can relate to that. And what's really interesting is that I'm going to make a reference back to last week's episode again, how guilt sabotages boundaries, because I said in that episode, how we do anything is how we do everything. And that I learned that phrase, I first heard that phrase from T. Harv Eker, who wrote The Millionaire Mind. And what it means is that if you struggle with something in one area of your life, in this case, boundaries, you're also likely to struggle with that very same thing in other areas of your life. So if you struggle with boundaries in your romantic relationships, it's highly likely that you also struggle with boundaries in your friendships, with family, with children, with work colleague. And I'm venturing to guess that you're pretty tired of feeling this way. I know I used to have really poor boundaries. I was very much a people pleaser, and I also had to learn how to cultivate healthy boundaries. But eventually you have to draw a line in the sand. And the thing about drawing the line in the sand is that learning to have boundaries and standing up for yourself and showing up for yourself and speaking your mind, all of those things it takes confidence. Learning boundaries requires a level of confidence and a level of knowing who you are, knowing your value, and knowing your worth. So have you ever encountered somebody who had absolutely no difficulty in standing up for themselves, asking for what they wanted, letting you know when something was not sitting right with them? Those are all different forms of boundaries beyond, politely turning down an offer or a request. So have you ever been in the company of somebody who does that? And if you did, how did you feel around that person? There's a couple of feelings that you may have experienced. First of all was rejection, or feeling bad or guilty for asking for something in the first place, if you were the one doing the asking. Or perhaps being caught off guard because somebody actually declined an offer, said no, whatever it happened to be. Or perhaps it was admiration that they were so confident in who they are. They had a higher standard, higher bar set for themselves, that they were very confident in speaking up and saying what needed to be said. A lot of people really admire that in other people. And you can also see how you feel when you're in the presence of somebody who is like that. There is an air of confidence and self-assurance in that person. Confidence is a really empowering quality. It shows other people that you value yourself, your time, and your well-being. It commands a different level of respect versus that feeling when somebody has an expectation of being respected. Because that person who has those boundaries with that level of confidence is also showing you that they're going to treat you that exact same way. So let's come back around to this concept of what you will lose by drawing the line in the sand. And I mentioned that we are creatures of our possessions, meaning that it's not easy for us to let go of things, especially people that we love and are important to us. The thing about that is that if somebody leaves because you have drawn a line in the sand, and now you're showing up for yourself, if that person chooses to leave, just know that that person wasn't right for you. Because remember, I said that when we don't have strong boundaries, we cultivate codependent relationships. So now by drawing the line in the sand and somebody leaving, that's a really clear indicator that perhaps that person was not the right person for who you have or are becoming, a person with boundaries. It could also be that you have outgrown the person if they choose to leave or the relationship dissolves. Or what it could also mean is that the relationship just needs to be rebalanced so that it could be healthier, a more balanced relationship. And I know that I've actually experienced that as well, where I've put down a boundary and it made the relationship extremely uncomfortable for a time because the other person is used to you always acquiescing or giving in or keeping the peace or not saying anything, and it causes a bit of disturbance in the relationship. But if that person hangs around, the relationship reacclimates itself to the new boundaries and things start to settle down, which is an amazing thing. The fear of losing someone or something does not bring you to the ultimate happiness and fulfillment and joy if you're wrapped up in that fear. And it does not lead you to living your best life. That's why I say the boundaries that you have or have a difficult time with, having healthy boundaries is going to lead to more fulfillment and more joy in your life. Whereas if you're wrapped up in the fear of losing somebody, it's not going to lead you to a healthy, balanced relationship and happiness and fulfillment and joy in your life. And remember, I also said that how you do one thing, if you struggle with it in relationships, you're also going to have a struggle with it in other areas of your lives. So I encourage you and I ask you, what line in the sand will you draw today that will help you get a little bit closer to shifting and having more confidence in yourself? If you have liked this week's episode, leave a comment below. Feel free to visit my website for more information about my work and how I help women have more self-love. www.irissariani.com. And until I see you on the next episode, I'm sending you so much love, so much support, so much encouragement. Take good care.